The ink on the marriage certificate was barely dry, yet the distance between them and the king-size bed felt like an ocean neither wanted to cross. It wasn't just the lingering scent of expensive cologne on her dress that didn't belong to him. It was the way her eyes lit up only when the immigration lawyer called and went dead the moment she looked at her husband. There is a specific kind of heartbreak that comes when you realize you aren't a partner, but a passport. If you want to witness the quiet, devastating unraveling of a man who gave everything to a woman who only wanted a signature, stay with me. The rain in Chicago had a way of making everything look like a watercolor painting left out in the storm, blurred, gray, and weeping. Inside the high-rise apartment on the near north side, the atmosphere was equally damp, though strictly metaphorical. Ethan Caldwell sat at the dining table, the mahogany surface cool under his forearms. A plate of roasted chicken, now room temperature, sat untouched across from him. The only sound in the apartment was the rhythmic tick-tick-tick of the hallway clock and the aggressive tapping of fingernails against a smartphone screen. Elena didn't look up. She was standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, her reflection ghosting against the dark glass. She wore a silk robe that Ethan had bought her for their 6-month anniversary, a garment that cost more than his first car. But she wore it like armor, not lingerie. "Did you call the lawyer?" Elena asked, her voice devoid of the lilt that had first captivated him 2 years ago. Now her accent was sharp, clipped, businesslike. Ethan swirled the red wine in his glass. "I did. He said the interview creates a backlog. We just have to wait, Elena." "Wait," she scoffed, finally turning around. Her eyes, a piercing shade of blue, narrowed. "I am tired of waiting, Ethan. My friends, they get the permanent card in 6 months. Why are we always the ones waiting? Maybe you didn't file the income support papers correctly." "I filed them perfectly," Ethan said, keeping his voice steady, though a familiar knot of anxiety tightened in his chest. "I triple-checked. The system is just slow." "Or maybe you are slow," she muttered, turning back to her phone. A soft ping echoed in the room. Her demeanor shifted instantly. Her shoulders dropped, a small, private smile playing on her lips as she read the notification. It was a look Ethan hadn't received in months. He watched her fingers fly across the keyboard. "Who's that?" "Just my mother," she said too quickly. "She is worried about the visa. She says the laws are changing." Ethan knew it wasn't her mother. Her mother lived in a time zone 7 hours ahead. It was 3 a.m. there, but he didn't call her out. He was too tired. The architect firm had him running lead on the new Riverwalk project, and he was pulling 60-hour weeks to pay for this apartment, for the lease on Elena's Mercedes, for the life she insisted was necessary for her image. He stood up and walked over to her, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. He rested his chin on her shoulder, smelling her hair. It smelled of vanilla and something else. Something musky, expensive, and distinctly masculine, like sandalwood and aged leather. Elena stiffened. She didn't lean back into him. She stood rigid, like a statue tolerating a tourist's touch. "I'm tired, Ethan," she said, pulling away and stepping out of his embrace. She checked her phone again. "I'm going to sleep in the guest room tonight. I have a migraine." "Again?" Ethan asked, the hurt bleeding into his tone despite his best efforts. "Elena, we haven't—" "It's been weeks." She turned on him, her eyes flashing with a sudden, disproportionate anger. "Is that all you think about? Sex? I am worried about my life, about being kicked out of this country, and you want to have sex?" "I want to be with my wife," Ethan said softly. "I want to feel like we're in this together. Not like I'm your caseworker." Elena laughed, a cold, brittle sound. "When you make enough money to get me a real lawyer, one who can speed this up, then you can be my husband. Until then, yes, handle the paperwork." She walked past him, the silk robe trailing behind her. As she passed, the scent of that strange cologne hit him again, stronger this time. It wasn't his. It wasn't anything he owned. Ethan stood alone in the dim living room. He looked at the reflection in the window. A man who looked successful on the outside, but felt like he was slowly disappearing in his own home. He looked down at the table where her phone usually sat, but she had taken it with her. She always took it with her, even to the bathroom, even to the shower. He walked to the table and picked up the mail pile he had ignored earlier. On top was a thick envelope from the USCIS, United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, a request for evidence. He felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Chicago weather. He loved her. God, he loved her. But as he looked at the closed door of the guest room, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was the only one in this marriage who viewed the green card as a formality rather than the finish line. The phone in the guest room chimed again. A laugh, Elena's laugh, light and flirtatious, drifted through the door. Her migraine seemed to have miraculously vanished. Ethan sat down and stared at the envelope. The gallery opening in the West Loop was a sea of black turtlenecks, champagne flutes, and conversations that cost more than Ethan made in a year. The space was industrial chic, exposed brick, vaulted ceilings, and abstract paintings that looked like violent bruises on pristine white walls. Ethan stood near a sculpture made of twisted rebar, clutching a glass of warm, sparkling water. He hated these events. He felt like a prop, an accessory Elena wore to look grounded before she floated away to socialize with people who actually mattered to her career. Across the room, Elena was radiant. She wore a backless emerald dress that hugged her frame, her laughter ringing out like a bell above the drone of the crowd. She was talking to a tall man with silver fox hair and a bespoke suit that screamed old money. "You must be the husband," a voice drawled from his left. Ethan turned to see a woman with severe glasses and a clipboard. "I am, Ethan." "Charming," she said, looking past him. "Elena is quite the discovery. She has an eye for the avant-garde. Marcus seems taken with her." "Marcus?" "Marcus Thorne, the owner." The woman gestured with her pen toward the man Elena was speaking to. "He doesn't usually spend this much time with junior curators. Your wife must be persuasive." Ethan felt a prick of irritation, but he swallowed it. He navigated the crowd, moving toward his wife. As he approached, he saw Marcus lean in close to whisper something in Elena's ear. It wasn't the professional distance of a boss and an employee. It was intimate. Elena threw her head back and laughed, her hand coming up to rest lightly, briefly on Marcus's forearm. It was a touch she hadn't given Ethan in months. "Ethan!" Elena spotted him, her smile faltering for a fraction of a second before reassembling into something polite. "Come, meet Marcus. He is the one giving me the exhibition space next month." Marcus turned. His eyes were cold, assessing. He looked at Ethan the way a critic looks at a piece of art that doesn't quite fit the collection, bored and dismissive. "The architect," Marcus said, extending a hand. His grip was firm, aggressive. "Elena talks about you. She says you're very stable." The word hung in the air like an insult. Stable. Like a foundation. Like concrete. Something you walk on, not something you admire. "It's good to meet you," Ethan said, trying to project confidence. "Elena has worked hard for this." "She has indeed," Marcus smirked, his eyes flickering back to Elena. "She's very willing to do what it takes to secure her place in this city. I admire that kind of hunger." As Marcus moved closer to shake Ethan's hand, the air shifted. A wave of scent washed over Ethan. Sandalwood. Aged leather. It was the exact same smell that had clung to Elena's hair the night before. The smell he had tried to convince himself was just a new room spray or a candle she had bought. But here it was, radiating off this man's collar. Ethan's stomach dropped. The noise of the gallery seemed to fade into a dull roar. He looked at Elena. She wasn't looking at him. She was watching Marcus with a hunger that had nothing to do with art. "We should go soon," Ethan said, his voice tight. "It's getting late, and you have that meeting in the morning." Elena's expression hardened. "Don't be ridiculous, Ethan. The night is just starting. Marcus invited us to dinner with the investors. You can go home if you're tired. I can't leave now. It would look unprofessional." "I think I should stay," Ethan said, challenging her. "No," Marcus interjected, his voice smooth as silk. "Let the man rest, Elena. We'll take good care of her, Ethan. Don't worry. I'll make sure she gets home safely." It wasn't an offer. It was a dismissal. Elena turned her back on Ethan to grab another glass of champagne from a passing tray. "Go home, Ethan. You're bringing down the mood. I'll Uber back later." Ethan stood there for a moment, the scent of sandalwood choking him. He looked at his wife glowing under the gallery lights and realized with a sickening clarity that she wasn't just climbing the social ladder. She was climbing into another man's bed, and she was using Ethan's stability to hold the ladder steady while she did it. He placed his full glass on a pedestal, turned around, and walked out into the cold Chicago night. He didn't go home. He went to his office, sat in the dark, and opened his laptop. If she wanted to play games with her schedule, he decided he should probably look at her schedule too, specifically the synced calendar she thought he never checked. The architectural firm on Wacker Drive was silent, save for the hum of the HVAC system and the distant wail of a siren somewhere in the loop. Ethan sat in his glass-walled office, the city skyline glowing indifferently behind him. His laptop screen cast a harsh blue pallor over his face. He wasn't working on the Riverwalk blueprints. Instead, he was staring at a dialog box. Sync with Family Cloud? Elena had always been careless with technology. She assumed that because Ethan was an architect, a man of physical structures, concrete and steel, he was oblivious to the digital mesh that connected their devices. She used his old iPad for reading, and she had logged into her iMessage account on it weeks ago, forgetting to sign out. His finger hovered over the trackpad. A part of him, the part that still remembered their wedding vows whispered in a hurried City Hall ceremony, wanted to close the laptop and go home. He wanted to believe she was just networking. He wanted to believe the sandalwood scent was a coincidence. He clicked sync. The application froze for a moment, the spinning wheel mocking his heart rate, before a cascade of data flooded the screen. Photos first, selfies in mirrors he didn't recognize, pictures of expensive jewelry, and then photos of her and Marcus. They weren't just colleagues. In one photo, taken in what looked like a hotel suite, Marcus was kissing her neck while she smiled at the camera, a glass of champagne in her hand. The timestamp was from last Tuesday, when she was supposedly at a curatorial workshop. Ethan felt the air leave his lungs, a physical blow that doubled him over in his ergonomic chair. But photos were just evidence of lust. He needed to understand the why. He opened the Messages app. The thread with Marcus was explicit, filled with plans for weekends away and mocking comments about Ethan's boring dedication to his job. But it was the thread with a contact named Mama that stopped Ethan cold. The messages were in English. Elena's mother insisted on practicing to prepare for her own potential visa interview. Mama, is he suspicious? Elena. No, he is a golden retriever. He just works and pays the bills. I told him I have a migraine again. Mama, be careful. You need him for the interview next month. Only 8 more months until the conditions are removed. Ethan reread the line. Only 8 more months. He scrolled down, his eyes burning. Elena, I know. I am counting the days. As soon as the 10-year card is in my hand, I am filing. I can't stand sleeping in the same bed as him anymore. He is so suffocatingly nice. It's pathetic. Mama, just hold on. The prize is America. Marcus can give you the life, but Ethan gives you the papers. Don't mess it up. Elena, I won't. I'll play the loving wife for the interview. I'll hold his hand, and then I'll be free. Ethan sat back, the silence of the office now deafening. It wasn't just an affair, it was a transaction. He wasn't a husband, he was a mule, a vehicle to get her across a border she couldn't cross alone. Every I love you, every shared dinner, every moment of intimacy had been a calculated performance to satisfy a federal requirement. He felt a strange sensation wash over him. The grief evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. It was the same feeling he got when he looked at a building with a cracked foundation. You don't try to patch it with paint. You condemn it. You bring it down before it collapses on top of you. He didn't scream. He didn't throw the computer. With the steady hands of a draftsman, Ethan took screenshots of everything. The texts, the timestamps, the photos, the admission of fraud. He created a new folder on an external hard drive, encrypted it, and saved the files. Then he logged out. He wiped the browser history. He shut down the laptop and placed it in his bag. Ethan stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the Chicago River, black and oily in the night. He checked his watch. 2:00 a.m. Elena would be home soon, likely feigning exhaustion, smelling of Marcus. He would go home too. He would lie in their bed. He would wait. But he wasn't waiting for her love anymore. He was waiting for business hours when the immigration law offices opened. The offices of Sterling and Vance were located 3 blocks from the federal courthouse, in a building that smelled of old money and lemon polish. It was a place people went when love had curdled into litigation. Ethan sat opposite Arthur Vance, a man with a face like crumpled parchment and eyes that had seen every variation of human deceit. On the desk between them lay the printed screenshots of Elena's texts, a damning stack of paper clipped neatly at the corner. Vance adjusted his spectacles, reading the transcript of Elena's conversation with her mother for the 3rd time. He didn't look shocked. He looked bored. "It's textbook," Vance said, his voice dry. "Section 204C of the Immigration and Nationality Act. Marriage fraud. She isn't just cheating on you, Mr. Caldwell. She is committing a federal crime to bypass immigration quotas." "So I can just divorce her?" Ethan asked, his hands gripping the armrests of the leather chair. Vance took off his glasses and looked at Ethan with pitying severity. "If you file for a standard no-fault divorce, she can apply for a waiver. She can claim the marriage was entered in good faith, but failed due to irreconcilable differences. Given she has been here almost 2 years, she might still get her 10-year card. She wins." Ethan felt the bile rise in his throat. "She doesn't win. Not after this." "Then we don't file for divorce," Vance said, opening a file folder. "We file for an annulment based on fraud, and simultaneously we send a formal letter to USCIS withdrawing your Form I-864, the affidavit of support. You are currently financially responsible for her for 10 years or until she becomes a citizen. You need to sever that bond immediately." Vance slid a document across the desk. It was a single page, terrifying in its simplicity. "Request for withdrawal of petition." "Here is the hard part, Ethan," Vance continued, his tone dropping an octave. "You cannot go home and scream at her. You cannot throw her clothes on the street. If you show aggression, she will call the police, claim domestic abuse, and use VAWA, the Violence Against Women Act, to self-petition for a green card. It happens all the time. If she becomes the victim, she stays." Ethan stared at the paper. The pen felt heavy in his hand. "So I have to lie." "You have to be a ghost," Vance corrected. "You go home, you eat dinner, you ask about her day. You let her believe the plan is working. Meanwhile, I will file these. The moment USCIS receives this withdrawal, her adjustment of status stops. She will receive a notice of intent to deny. By the time she gets that letter, you will be gone." Ethan signed the document. The scratch of the pen on paper sounded loud in the quiet office. It felt less like a signature and more like an execution order. That evening, the apartment was quiet. Elena was on the sofa, flipping through an art auction catalog. She looked up when Ethan entered, her face composed into a mask of mild interest. "You're late," she said. "Did you stop for groceries?" Ethan hung his coat up. He could smell the lingering scent of her perfume, and underneath it, the faint trace of the sandalwood cologne she hadn't quite scrubbed off. He looked at her, really looked at her. He saw the beautiful curve of her jaw, the way her hair fell over her shoulder, the woman he had wanted to build a life with, and he saw the calculator behind her eyes. "Work ran late," Ethan said, his voice surprisingly steady. "Project deadlines. You know how it is." "I need your credit card," Elena said, not looking up from the catalog. "I need to book the flight for my mother to visit, for the interview." Ethan walked to the kitchen and poured himself a glass of water to hide the trembling in his hands. He was about to destroy her life. He was about to send her back to a country she despised, stripping her of the gallery, the lover, the future she felt entitled to. "Sure," Ethan said, taking a sip. "Book it. Get the refundable one, though. Just in case plans change." Elena smiled, a triumphant, predatory little smirk. "Plans won't change, Ethan. Everything is right on schedule." Ethan turned away so she wouldn't see the coldness in his eyes. "Yes," he whispered to the empty kitchen. "It certainly is." Saturday morning arrived with a deceptive brightness. Elena was packing a weekend bag, silk scarves, oversized sunglasses, and a bikini that seemed ambitious for a wellness retreat in Lake Geneva. "The girls are driving up together," she lied, smoothing her hair in the hallway mirror. She didn't look at Ethan. She was too busy checking her reflection, ensuring she looked perfect for Marcus. "I'll be back Sunday night. Don't wait up." "Have fun," Ethan said. He was sitting on the sofa, drinking coffee black. He didn't stand up to kiss her goodbye. He didn't offer to carry her bag to the car. She paused for a second, sensing the shift in the air. But her narcissism filled the gap before suspicion could take root. "I will. Try to get out of the house, Ethan. You look pale." The door clicked shut. The lock turned. Then the sound of her heels fading down the corridor. Ethan waited exactly 5 minutes. He walked to the window and watched as Marcus's black Range Rover pulled up to the curb. Elena hopped in, the girls nowhere to be seen. He watched them drive away, merging into the traffic of the city she wanted so desperately to own. Then he moved. He didn't tear the house apart. He didn't smash the vases or cut up her clothes. That was the behavior of a man who still cared, a man who was hurt. Ethan was past hurt. He was in the realm of indifference. He walked into the bedroom and pulled 2 large suitcases from the top shelf of the closet. He packed methodically: suits, shirts, the architectural journals, his grandfather's watch. He left the wedding album on the nightstand. He left the expensive espresso machine she insisted they buy. He left the sheets on the bed. Within 2 hours, his existence in the apartment had been reduced to 3 bags standing by the door. The apartment looked strange, half empty, like a smile with a missing tooth. He went to the kitchen island, the cold slab of Carrara marble where they had signed their lease 2 years ago. He placed a single manila envelope in the center. Inside were copies of the annulment filing and the withdrawal of the affidavit of support. He had also included a printout of the bank notification. The joint accounts had been frozen, and his direct deposits had been rerouted. The credit cards she carried in her purse were now pieces of plastic with zero purchasing power. He took out his phone. He opened her contact. Block caller. He opened Instagram, WhatsApp, email. Block, block, block. He didn't leave a handwritten note. He didn't leave a letter explaining his heartbreak or asking why. Arthur Vance's advice echoed in his head. Any word you write can be twisted. Silence is the only thing they can interpret. He took the key to the apartment off his ring. He placed it on top of the envelope. The metal made a sharp clink against the marble, the final punctuation mark of their marriage. Ethan put on his coat. He grabbed the handles of his suitcases. He took one last look around the space. It smelled of her perfume and the stale air of a lie that had gone on too long. He didn't feel sad. He felt light. He walked out, pulling the door shut behind him. He didn't lock it. He didn't have a key anymore. The elevator ride down to the lobby felt like a decompression chamber. When the doors opened, the doorman, a kindly older man named Henry, smiled at him. "Traveling for work, Mr. Caldwell?" "Something like that, Henry," Ethan said, handing the man a generous tip. "Take care of yourself." He walked out onto the street, hailed a cab, and gave the driver the address of a short-term rental in Lincoln Park. As the taxi pulled away, merging into the flow of traffic, Ethan didn't look back at the high-rise. He looked forward at the gray stretch of road ahead, realizing that for the first time in 2 years, the direction he was heading was entirely up to him. Sunday evening descended on Chicago like a heavy curtain. The ride back from the airport was quiet, mostly because Marcus had taken a business call the entire way, leaving Elena to scroll through her phone in the back of the Uber Black. When the car pulled up to her building, Marcus leaned over and kissed her cheek. A dry, distracted peck. "I'll see you Tuesday at the gallery. Wear the red dress." "Of course," Elena purred, stepping out onto the sidewalk. She felt invincible. She had just spent the weekend in a lake house that cost more than Ethan's entire education. Drinking vintage wine and being told she was a muse. The invincibility lasted exactly 3 minutes. It cracked when she tried to pay for the Uber. The app flashed a red notification. Payment declined. Please update your payment method. Elena frowned, tapping the screen aggressively. "Try it again," she muttered to herself. It declined again. The driver, a weary man with dark circles under his eyes, turned around. "Miss, it's not going through." Flustered, she pulled a credit card from her purse, the platinum joint account card, and handed it over to be swiped on his square reader. Declined. She had to dig into the emergency cash stash she kept in her makeup bag, crumpled 20s she usually saved for tips, to pay the fare. She slammed the car door, her face burning. "Stupid bank," she hissed. "Ethan probably forgot to pay the bill." She stormed into the lobby. Henry, the doorman, tipped his hat but didn't make eye contact. He looked busy with a package log. Elena ignored him and marched to the elevator. When she reached her door, she fished for her key, slid it into the lock, and turned. It opened. The apartment was dark. "Ethan," she called out, ready to unleash a lecture about the credit card embarrassment. Silence answered her. Not the comfortable silence of an empty room, but the hollow echoing silence of a vacated space. She flipped the light switch. Her eyes went immediately to the kitchen island. The marble surface was bare, except for the manila envelope, and her own spare key resting on top of it like a tombstone. She walked over, the click of her heels sounding too loud on the hardwood. She ripped the envelope open. She didn't read the whole thing. Her eyes skimmed for keywords, a habit she had picked up from reading contracts. Annulment, fraud, withdrawal of I-864, immediate effect. She let the papers fall to the counter. A laugh bubbled up in her throat, a sharp, incredulous sound. "He thinks he can scare me," she said aloud. "He thinks he can just cancel me?" She grabbed her phone and dialed Ethan. "The number you have dialed is not accepting calls at this time." She tried WhatsApp. Message not delivered. She checked Instagram. User not found. He hadn't just left. He had deleted her. The realization should have been terrifying. The document on the counter stated clearly that without his sponsorship, her status was in jeopardy. But Elena didn't feel fear. She felt insulted. "Pathetic," she sneered, looking at the empty spot where his coat rack used to be. "You weak little man." She didn't need Ethan. She had used him for the paperwork, yes, but she had Marcus now. Marcus knew judges. Marcus knew senators. Marcus had lawyers who ate men like Ethan for breakfast. She dialed Marcus's number. He answered on the second ring. "Miss me already?" His voice was smooth, confident. "Ethan is gone," she said, trying to sound like a victim. "He cleared out the accounts. He filed some ridiculous papers saying our marriage was a fraud. He left me with nothing, Marcus. I can't even buy groceries." There was a pause on the line. "He filed for fraud?" "He's just jealous," Elena said quickly. "He's trying to hurt me because I'm out of his league. But I'm worried about the visa. He withdrew the support." Marcus chuckled, a low, dismissive sound that wrapped around Elena like a warm blanket. "Darling, don't worry about the little architect. He's throwing a tantrum. I'll have my legal team look at it tomorrow. We'll get you a temporary stay or something. You're with me now. Nobody gets deported when they're with me." Elena smiled, leaning back against the cold marble counter. She kicked the manila envelope onto the floor. "I knew you would fix it," she cooed. "Get some sleep," Marcus said. "I'll see you Tuesday." Elena hung up. She looked around the apartment that Ethan paid for, at the furniture Ethan bought. She felt a surge of triumph. She had pushed him until he broke, and now she was free. She didn't realize that the manila envelope on the floor wasn't a tantrum. It was a ticking clock, and she had just decided to ignore the countdown. She went to the bedroom, stripped off her clothes, and slept diagonally across the king-size bed, dreaming of gallery openings and a new life where she never had to wait for anyone. 5 years is a long time in the art world. It is enough time for a movement to die, for a gallery to close, and for a muse to be replaced. Elena sat in her car, a leased Audi that was 2 years old, tapping her fingers against the steering wheel. She was parked outside the Thorn Collective, watching through the rain-streaked windshield. Inside the brightly lit gallery, Marcus was holding court, but he wasn't looking at the door, waiting for Elena. He was laughing with a girl who couldn't have been more than 22, a waifish brunette with wide eyes and a chaotic energy that Elena used to possess. Elena checked her reflection in the rearview mirror. At 31, she was still beautiful, but there was a hardness to her now. The lines around her mouth were etched with bitterness, and the anxiety she masked with expensive foundation was beginning to show. Marcus had stopped inviting her to the important dinners 6 months ago. He stopped returning her texts last week. She put the car in gear, her stomach churning with a mix of rage and nausea. She needed to get home. She needed a drink. As she pulled onto Lakeshore Drive, The blue and red lights exploded in her rearview mirror. Elena swore under her breath. "Not now," she hissed. She pulled over, assuming it was for speeding. She rolled down the window as the officer approached, putting on her best charming damsel smile. "Good evening, officer. Was I going a little too fast?" The officer, a young man with a flat expression, didn't smile back. "License and registration, ma'am." Elena handed them over. Her driver's license was valid, barely. She had managed to renew it through a loophole she found online, but she knew the foundation it rested on was rotten. The officer walked back to his cruiser. He stayed there for a long time. 5 minutes became 10. Elena watched him speaking into his radio. A second cruiser pulled up behind him. Her heart began to hammer against her ribs. The charm evaporated, replaced by the cold, primal fear of a hunted animal. The officer returned, but this time, he didn't come to the window. He opened her car door. "Ma'am, I need you to step out of the vehicle." "What? Why?" Elena's voice pitched up. "It's just a speeding ticket." "Step out of the vehicle, please." She stumbled out, the cold wind off the lake whipping her hair across her face. "This is ridiculous. Do you know who I am? Do you know who my partner is?" "Ma'am, we have a warrant for your arrest regarding an administrative removal order issued by an immigration judge 3 years ago," the officer said, reaching for his handcuffs. "You failed to appear for your hearing." The metal cuffs clicked shut around her wrists. The sound was louder than the traffic. "No," Elena gasped. "That's a mistake. My lawyer, Marcus, said he fixed it. He said it was handled." "You can explain that to the federal agents," the officer said, guiding her toward the back seat of the cruiser. From the holding cell at the precinct, the smell of bleach and unwashed bodies assaulting her senses, Elena used her one phone call. She dialed Marcus. Her fingers trembled so badly she misdialed twice. It rang and rang. "Hello," Marcus's voice. He sounded annoyed, distracted. Background noise, jazz music, laughter. "Marcus, it's me. They arrested me," Elena sobbed, all her poise gone. "They say I have a removal order. You said you fixed the papers. You said the lawyers took care of Ethan's mess." There was a long silence on the other end, then a sigh. "Elena," Marcus said, his tone devoid of warmth, "I told you to handle your own housekeeping years ago. I'm an art dealer, not an immigration attorney. Don't drag me into this." "But I have guests, Elena. Do not call this number again." The line went dead. Elena stared at the phone receiver, the plastic greasy against her ear. The realization hit her like a physical blow. There was no we. There never had been. She was just an exhibit in Marcus's collection, and now that she was damaged goods, she had been deaccessioned. She was alone. She was going to be deported. Panic, sharp and blinding, clawed at her throat. She had one option left. One person who might still have the paperwork or the mercy to save her. One person whose signature she had forged on her heart, if not on the documents. She begged the officer for 5 more minutes. She searched her memory for a number she hadn't dialed in half a decade. A number she had blocked but never forgotten. She dialed the number for Ethan Caldwell. The visitor's room at the detention center was a study in gray. Gray walls, gray floors, and the gray, flickering light of a fluorescent tube that buzzed like a dying insect. Ethan sat on one side of the plexiglass partition. He looked different than the man who had packed 3 suitcases and fled into the night 5 years ago. His shoulders were broader, his posture relaxed. He wore a wool coat that looked warm, and on his left ring finger a simple gold band gleamed. Not the flashy platinum ring Elena had picked out for him, but something understated and real. When the heavy steel door buzzed open, Elena walked in. She was wearing an orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on her frame. Her hair, once her crowning glory, was pulled back in a messy knot, revealing roots that hadn't been touched up in weeks. Without the armor of designer clothes and makeup, she looked younger, yet infinitely more tired. She sat down, picking up the black phone receiver. Ethan did the same. "You came," she said, her voice cracking. Her eyes searched his face, looking for the soft-hearted architect she used to manipulate. "You called," Ethan said. His voice was calm, devoid of the trembling anger she might have expected. "I was surprised you still had the number." "I never deleted it," she lied. Tears welled up in her eyes, a performance that felt rusty. "Ethan," It's a nightmare in here. They're going to put me on a plane back to Kiev on Tuesday. I have nothing there. My life is here. Ethan watched her, feeling a strange sense of detachment. It was like watching a movie he had already seen the ending to. You built a life here on a foundation that didn't exist, Elena? It existed, she pressed, leaning forward, her breath fogging the glass. We had good times. You loved me. I know you did. All you have to do is tell the judge that we married for love. Tell them the fraud claim was a mistake, a misunderstanding because you were hurt. If you sign an affidavit, they might let me stay. She looked at him, pleading. Marcus abandoned me. You are the only one who knows me. Please, for the sake of what we had. Ethan looked down at his wedding ring. He thought of his wife, Sarah, who was currently at home painting the nursery for their daughter, due in 3 months. Sarah, who loved him for his kindness, not his sponsorship. Sarah, who had never once made him feel like a transaction. I can't do that, Elena, Ethan said. Why? She snapped, a flash of the old entitlement breaking through. Because you want revenge. After 5 years? No, Ethan said softly, because it would be a lie. I did love you, Elena. I loved you so much I was blind. But you didn't love me. You loved a signature. You loved a status. And I won't perjure myself to validate a con. Elena's face twisted. So that's it? You're just going to let them throw me out? After everything? You threw yourself out, Ethan said. He stood up. I came today because I wanted to see if you were okay, and to tell you that I forgive you. Elena blinked, stunned. You forgive me? Yes, because if you hadn't used me, I never would have left. And if I hadn't left, I never would have found the life I have now. So thank you. He hung up the phone. Ethan, she screamed, her voice muffled behind the glass. She slammed her hand against the partition. Ethan, don't walk away. You owe me. You owe me this. Ethan didn't look back. He walked toward the heavy steel door, the buzzing of the lights fading behind him. He stepped out of the facility and into the crisp Chicago afternoon. The air was cold, biting, and incredibly clean. He checked his watch. He was late for dinner. Sarah was making roast chicken, and this time, he knew the conversation across the table would be real. He walked to his car, unlocked the door, and drove away, leaving the pass locked behind a gate that he would never have to open again.